And we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys doing today? Welcome back to another episode of the Teacher Project 2.0. As always, I'm here with it's myself and my lovely, wonderful co-host, Dr. L. Teddy 27. You want to speak to the people, sir?
Well, hello. How art thou?
Not hello or how art thou? So how's everything going for you? How are you doing? We're in, I don't even know what week, what day. I know you are at work, you're in a different area of education these days, but how's everything going with you where you are with
Everything's going well.
okay. With everything going on in our world today, if you were so the topic today is how are we going to deal with teaching our children, our students about tolerance, what parents can do right now that we're at home, what types of resources are, hey, Ebs, what type of resources are available, what types of things can we do as an education society to help our kids navigate this landmine we find ourselves in with everything that's on the news, with the protesting, with the rioting, with what's the real message. We are still in Pride Month, so we're going to definitely speak on issues of inclusion and tolerance. Hey, Reese's Pieces, when it comes to the LGBTQIA community, and so that's our topic for today. As always, we're going to try to keep you guys for an hour, and then we're gonna talk it out. So we're going to start with the video that I think is a perfect segue into what it is that we're speaking on. And this is actually a great video. I'll put the link in the description box at the end. It's a great video to share with your students, your children and students when you start talking about to get the conversation going. So El Teddy, can you speak to the people while I get this set up, sir?
And what the video does is it gets the conversation going, letting all parties know what privilege is and what it means. Sometimes even Black students or brown students or students of color don't realize or aren't aware of what privilege is and what it means. And if you are a white student that lives around white people all day, you live in an area where there are few, if any, Black people, you may not be aware that you have privilege either. That's not something that your world even thinks about. It can be for ages 8 and 12. I think definitely children 8 will understand it, as definitely a child at 12 will definitely understand. You might want to make it big.
I'm gonna make it full screen. But this, like I said, I'll put the link in the description box. So let's go ahead and let's. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Let me make sure I did this right. I'm always, when I do the share screen, I need to make sure I put the share audio part. Okay, here we go. Got it this time. Alrighty. Full screen. Okay, here we go.
Line up, everybody line up. We're about to race. Everybody line up.
Can you see it?
Shoulder to shoulder. Take off your belt.
See it?
Line up. We're about to race.
You can't see it?
Can't see it, but we hear it.
Okay, hold on. Let me make sure I'm doing this right. What am I doing wrong? I really need to practice my share screen skills. All right, here it is. I'm sharing the screen. Can we see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. A $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I've said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunities. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
So, El Teddy, what is that? What does that say? If you're in the classroom and you start off your lesson with that, where do we go from here? If you're teaching that, where do we go from here? What's the conversation?
Well, I don't do a whole lot. I as a teacher, I don't do a whole lot of talking. I would start the conversation off by saying, what are your thoughts? Actually, no, I wouldn't. I would actually start off my classroom in total silence. Mm-hmm. And I would tell them, I say, I need at least a half a page takeaway from what you saw. Don't Absolutely. Talk to nobody. Give me a half a page takeaway from what you saw. No interaction with nobody. Don't look at nobody. Don't talk to nobody. Mm-hmm. What did you take away from that video? In your own words, uninfluenced by anybody else. Half a page of writing. Once they do that, then I break them into groups and have them discuss with about 3 or 4 other people. Then we have a full class discussion after that. But definitely, I will want their raw, unabridged thoughts, emotions, or takeaways from what
Absolutely. They. And I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
And what's funny is without us even having a conversation about it, without us planning it, honestly, that's exactly what I would do. I don't want to talk. I want to hear, write it. write it, and then I want you guys to talk to each other, and then let's have the big conversation. And the biggest thing that I always stress to my students is this is a no judgment zone. So we're not, whatever your answer is, that is your feeling, that is how you feel, and we're not going to we're not judging anyone, but let's have the conversation, let's share. And so it's funny, like I said, without us even really talking about it, that's pretty much how I would handle it as well. I see people in the comments are saying powerful message. Wow. It is the first time I saw that video, I was like, this is perfect. Like this is perfect. And it is definitely a great way to start the conversation whenever you're in an environment where you have to start talking about the hard truth that we do not all start at the same place. Now we don't need to get into the debate about why or how we got there, but it's the fact that we didn't start off at the same place. El Teddy has been very, go ahead.
I think it's important. One of the things that is important that when I watch it, I took away was he didn't stop the race.
No.
He still said they got to run their race, and you still got to run your race.
Absolutely.
Their advantage. This is where you are. This is what it is. And then I really wish they had the aerial view from beginning to end, or more of the aerial views, because to actually see the disparity. Because even when you had the white students that were forward, when it got toward the end, there were way more white males. Even the white males began to leave the white females behind.
Absolutely.
You started to look at, the answers to the questions. And as unfair as it was, you saw a lot of those Black people, just in a matter of seconds, mitigated the gap that they had in between them and the disadvantages that they had. That they had from the start, and that is real, very real.
Absolutely. What I was going to say is, you've been very candid about, the general part of your story, that where you came from, and the fact that you were very intelligent and you were in certain programs, but that it still was not easy when you compare to your white counterparts. Your abilities and the opportunities that may have come your way. And again, you were able to win the race. Well, win is a relative term, but you did well. You went to college, you have your PhD. So it did not, you still were able to, I would say, win the race when you're talking about that part of it. But absolutely, there were obstacles in your way that just didn't exist. You went to a predominantly white college that didn't exist for some of your male counterparts within your own program. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only did I go to that white college, they paid for me to go there.
Right, absolutely.
And it wasn't one of those affirmative action type, oh, we gonna help you out because you're Black. No, because on the merits of,
right, because you are that you earned it,
I will say that, just thinking about it, if I use the same metaphor, the amount of energy that you have to expend in order to mitigate the disadvantage that you have, the extra miles that you have to go, the more effort that you have to put. Think about how much harder you have to run if you're all the way in the back as opposed to the person who's all the way in the front.
Absolutely.
It's so much.
And I think sometimes going into the conversation of teaching tolerance, I think sometimes that's the part of the conversation that a lot of people just don't want to accept, is the fact. These are the facts of what we're dealing with. And whether you are a teacher walking into a classroom, I know this was something I had to learn, even as a I'm not white, even as a Black female, that was something that I had to learn because that wasn't my experience. I didn't go to public school. I went to private school, and I'm not saying that as a way to say I was better than, but there were certain things I didn't encounter in school with my classmates. There were just certain things I didn't encounter, and so as a teacher, there were things that I had to accept and learn, as far as moving forward, as for myself as well. So, Yeah, Dami says, as a teaching tool, these are the kinds of videos we show teachers instead of students. Exactly,
I
exactly.
think it's
Teachers need to.
important. Certain things, when I was first starting in teaching these types of things, and we were kind of instructed, there were three things that we were taught. The teacher told us, you one have to be self-aware. You have to know your own biases that you have, and acknowledge them so that you can work to, work around whatever biases you already have. Everybody has biases. The second
Yeah.
one you have to have is, they said that you have to be able to have self-management when there is a discussion, and when a student does say something that's inflammatory or something that may foment a response from you. Um, you need to know how to have self-management and how to control your body language, or how to control the inflection or tone of voice and how you respond to a student. I know one thing I used to always do, my grandfather used to teach me, and teach me this when I was growing up. He used to say, feel your feet on the ground, feel your feet on the ground. And that was meaning, just stop. Feel your feet on the ground. Focus on your feet, which would get your
Mhm.
mind off of what was in your head and what was in your heart. It was focus on your feet. Feel your feet on the ground. And then the other thing that you have, the third thing they told us you have to have is, you have to have inclusion, where your space makes everybody feel safe, culturally,
Yeah.
emotionally, racially, all of those things, or in all sorts of religion, all of that. It has to be a safe place. And you have to make it where everybody does at least feel safe, because you can't learn if you don't feel safe.
And that is valid. That is very valid. So I know for myself, last week, from the district where I work, I got this email that there was a lesson that, a pre-planned lesson for us, and it was mandated by the county that we all had to show this video and go through this PowerPoint and give this assignment to our students as a way to address what's going on. We looked at a video on George Floyd, and then the final essay, or the final assignment was to write a letter to someone who can elicit change. And so we had the conversation about, will we write the governor, will we write the mayor, will we write our congressman, and that kind of thing. And so a lot of counties are probably doing the same thing. And so I'm saying that to say, those of you that are still teaching from home or what have you, again, we keep telling you guys, check the website for your counties, because it's probably a lot of resources that they have posted in reference to what's going on, however they, whatever angle they want to come from, to address what we're dealing with and what we're seeing. As a social studies teacher, I know for myself, we get into the social action aspect of it. And I know that there are a lot of resources that I found, some resources El Teddy's going to share a little bit later. And I will, again, y'all know I'll always post them in the description box. But I found some resources on the website, Teaching Tolerance website. Teaching for Change, excuse me. Teaching for Change website. There's actually a PDF of a book for parents, and it breaks down for each grade level what is appropriate, what's the appropriate conversation, how you can start the conversation with your kids. So that's free on the Teaching for Change website. There was also an article that directly goes back to that video and what El Teddy was just saying in reference to parents and teachers understanding. The book is called No One is Born with an Achievement Gap, or something to that effect. But it speaks on how we're all born equally, but it's what happens after that. What environment we were born into, what our home life was, what happened before we started pre-K, what happened before we started kindergarten, that kind of thing. And it speaks to a lot of those issues so that people understand that where the achievement gap, that it starts from day one. It starts from the day you're born. That achievement gap develops depending on your home situation and things of that nature. And so I will post all of those resources for you guys as it pertains to helping you talk to your students about, excuse me, I keep saying students, children, about what it is that they're seeing.
I think one thing that you do have to do as you go into educator mode, um, you got it goes back to what I said. You have to be self-aware and know your own biases. One thing that I would always do is when I address a current event in class, like something like that was going on right now, I would always show at least 3 to 4 different news outlets and how they covered it from all angles inside, so that we all knew the story, but I would have it told from different angles so that you could see all of the vantage points that someone may come at you at. Because I think if you're only looking at it from your vantage point, you're not listening, and the conversation won't be fruitful and won't go anywhere. And then that's how you have people just yelling and just not really conversing, but they're just waiting for their time to talk.
Absolutely.
And instead of having the opportunity where there is the tolerance begin to happen and there's an understanding, you got to have people, the kids have the ability to grapple with, okay, someone feels the complete opposite from what I may feel. And I need to be able to know what it is that they see, or even if they're wrong, but at least know where they're coming from. So even if you did say, well, I know that that's wrong and I need to be able to address it, well, you can't really address it if you don't know the vantage point from whence they are coming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's how you build that dialogue. That's how you begin to start to encourage the conversation. And that's what I think is very important, that you have the conversation in the immediacy of it, but you got to cover it from all vantage points so nobody feels left out if you're in a classroom full of students. But even if you're just teaching that one child, that class of one, that one child needs to be able to know that there are other viewpoints, so that when they do go out in the world, they can meet the needs. They can be able to hit the ground running and be able to have a conversation, be able to talk about this and sound as if, they're not a lunatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think for myself, I think that people misunderstand the word tolerance for acceptance. I don't have to, and I think we'll get into that when we get into the LGBTQIA part of this. I don't have to accept your lifestyle to show tolerance and understanding. And so again, I don't have to accept the idea of maybe I don't have to accept Black Lives Matter, but I'm tolerating the fact that that is your experience and that is where you're coming from. And I think that might not have been the best example, but I think a lot of times people feel like when we're talking about tolerance, that means we have to agree, and we don't always have to agree with it, but we have to tolerate each other. And that's part of the problem where we're having right now with humanity, is that people don't want to, it's my way or it's wrong. And I think that's the biggest part of the whole teaching tolerance part of it, is to understand that you don't have to agree with it. I mean, you don't have to like it, but we have to accept who people are, and that we're going to move together for the greater of humanity. Does that make sense? I didn't use the best example, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. I think that, a method that I use so often is, even when I teach have classrooms that's predominantly students of color, when I talk when I bring speeches, or when I bring writings, or when I bring different situations where people talk and discuss race, and they talk about the plight of people of color, one of the things I like to do is I like to hit them from another angle sometimes, because we all know the stories that we take from home, from our own parents. We all know the stories that we've lived, but I often bring the voice of someone of a different race speaking about the plight of African Americans, someone that may be an ally for African Americans. Is known, no group of minorities have ever made it anywhere without someone, or a large percentage of the majority, saying, I'm going to help you make your situation better. Without white people, we would still be slaves. That's the long and short of it. Without white people, black people would still be in Jim Crow. And so I oftentimes try to give them that so that they can see, hear from a different angle. And that kind of, and what I did it for a purpose, because it would buffer me. So anytime, because I had it happen one time, I had a parent that came out to the school, and they would look at, because I would give writing samples and things like that, and they would take it home, and their parents would go through it with them. And they said, well, why are you always bringing my child only black authors, and you always talk about black issues and black authors? And I pulled the authors, and I pulled them up right on my phone. Here's the first one. They're not black. Here's the next one. They're not black. Here's the next one. They're not black. Here's the next one. I've not introduced your child to one black author yet. I will, but I haven't yet, because I want to show them that this is not just a black thing. This is an America thing. And that's the whole, when you start that dialogue, this is not just a black problem. This is an American problem.
Absolutely.
And so you got to do things like that to get the conversation started.
Right. And I think that that's valid too, as well, because I do the same thing in my classroom. And, a lot of times like I'm sure you do this as well. We go through the speech, we go through the primary source without necessarily identifying the author of it. And then, a lot of times kids are surprised to find out who was actually writing these things in that time period. And so for myself, I know going into school in the fall, I absolutely know that there'll be certain conversations that will have to be had, especially depending on what happens over the next couple of weeks. With the protesting, they are scheduling a march on Washington to, on the anniversary date. And so that is going to be a major, major thing, especially in this area where a lot of people will be converging on the Capitol during that time period. And so it'll definitely be a major part of the conversation. Thank you to everybody who was here. If you are looking at this in the playback, again, the email is scrolling along the bottom. Please, please, please make sure we look forward to any type of input you want to share, any questions you want to ask, any resources you want to share with us. We've had some educators that are following us that have sent us resources that we can pass out and share with our subscribers. So please, you guys, make sure that you are helping us out as far as that's concerned, because listen, there are a million resources, and the more the merrier with that. So I want to switch this topic over a little bit, and El Teddy is going to sort of take the lead on this. When we get into teaching tolerance, of course, June is Pride Month. A lot of things obviously are not going to happen that normally would happen during Pride because of our current state of the country. However, there's been a lot of conversation. Billy Porter put up a very controversial video, I think it was 2 days ago. And there's been a large conversation about what this teaching tolerance and this Black Lives Matter movement means to the LGBTQIA plus community. So El Teddy, from your vantage point, where are we? What do we need to do? What's going on?
What is going on? Now, let me preface by saying I cannot, just like Really B and I cannot speak for every teacher across the Fruited Plains.
Right.
And we can't speak for the whole of the teaching profession or education. Right. Neither can we speak for all Black people. And I definitely cannot speak for the entirety of the spectrum. Right. Nor can I speak for just the G in the spectrum, nor can I speak for just all of the Black gay community. But I would, I wanted to preface by saying I'll do my best to, speak on some things and talk about some things as I see it, having become a man of a certain age, and talk about some things. Now, one thing that myself and some of the more seasoned people speak on is there becomes this expectation that because there are LGBT rights, that is equal to the rights of LGBT people of color. And that is not the case. It just like the rights of the American populace is not equated to the rights and privileges of members of the Black race, which is why we have to have Black Lives Matter marches and things like that. At the same token, the civil rights that the Black populace has or experiences, the acceptance and tolerance that Blacks experience as a race in general, is farther ahead than what the Black LGBT experiences. Because you got to think that there was a huge well documented civil rights era for the Black populace in this country. There has yet to be that for the Black members of the spectrum. And so a lot of the little, instances of tolerance and acceptance that we have comes because we're drug along literally with with our white counterparts, who do all they can sometimes to remind us that we are not them. So I wanted to start by saying that first. Should we expect that we would like for our plight of those students of color or people of color that are on this spectrum to be more equal to just people of color in general? Yes, we would like that. We would love that. I would love to expect that. But having that expectation would mean that I would not be being realistic, because we know the history of if I'm just going with Black people, we know the history of Black people with the spectrum going all the way back to a few hundred years or so. So I wanted to start off by saying that now, when you talk about acceptance and you talk about, and we talked about this when we did the gingerbread person discussion and things like that, I think it's important that you start to teach the history first, that people start to become well read, that people start to know. And when I say people, I'm not talking about the ones in the spectrum. I'm talking about the ones that aren't in the spectrum. Really, B and I we're having a conversation a little bit earlier when she talked about some of the books that she read that introduced her to what it was like to be in the culture. And it makes you go, wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't realize that. And sometimes just education alone helps to build tolerance. And once you get to tolerance, then you can go to the level of acceptance. But before you can get to the point of acceptance, you have to get to the point of tolerance first, where you can be in the same room and not bother each other. And you know what I'm saying? And not try to make it worse for someone else. And then at that point, you can start to, move the needle toward acceptance. And that is such an important conversation when you're dealing with Pride Month and things like that. So, and I know, and she knows, and it'll definitely be on my page. I have a video that's coming out in the next day or two that is for Pride Month and so forth and so on. And it's going to give, key notable individuals that people need to know, that you just need to know. That if you're not in the spectrum, or definitely if you're in the spectrum, you need to know these people so that you can educate yourself and start to have the conversation. I always ask students during the month, who do you know in your family that is maybe on the spectrum? And how do you feel about that person? What does your family say right now about that? That's a conversation, because this is tangible to them right next to them. Do you have an uncle? Do you have an aunt? Do you have a cousin, a grandma, a niece? I don't know. Before you even get to the friends in school, but sometimes it's easier when you tell them to, identify someone in their family that they know maybe on the spectrum. Really, be how have you grappled with teaching, or not teaching, but well, yeah, I'll go with teaching tolerance, or teaching other students how to deal with students in the spectrum.
Um, the first thing for me, and this is just across the board, um, we just deal with this the language. We don't there's certain language that we're not going to use. There are words we're not going to use. There are things we're not going to say. Um, as far as I told you before, going into this school year is going to be the first year that they're including a unit on LGBTQIA history. So that'll be interesting to see that. But in the past, I've tried to deal with it by, discussing it in reference to our historical figures who identified as being on the spectrum. I always made sure that I spoke on that and that we discussed it in a respectful manner. It's not discussed as a joke or a ha ha ha, or even as an aside. It's a part, we talked about Baynard Rustin, who, first of all, a lot of our kids don't even know who he is, but then dealing with all of that, and that encompassed who he was and his impact and why that limited him, with why we don't know a lot about him when it comes to the civil rights movement. So for me, the very first thing is creating an environment in my classroom of inclusion. We don't use certain words, like, regardless. It's just like, for me, it's just like profanity. I may curse in my private life, but I'm not going to curse in front of my students. So there's language we don't use. We don't call somebody, he acting gay. No, we're not using that language. And so, like, going back to what we were saying in the first part, creating a safe space. That's the first thing for me, is making sure that I'm creating a safe space. And again, dealing with it head on, and not pretending like it's something wrong with it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. I think also too, one of the things that I try, because I remember being a student in school and I remember what it felt like. I try to give them the opportunity to be comfortable, even if you have a safe space, even if your classroom is a safe space and a safe environment. There's still, especially depending on their age range, if they're in middle school, definitely, or younger in high school, they still may be grappling with their own orientation and sexuality and trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes some people try so hard to move the needle toward the other side that they kind of try to force the child to come out of their shell, and they're just not ready.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not comfortable for them. And so it's so funny. I'm gonna tell a quick story. I was Baby and I had a quick text conversation, but one time she and I were texting, and she texted me. She said, "You said there was a lot of bass in your take that bass out your voice." And I took a moment. I had a moment. I had an out of body experience that I was transformed back to when I was a child. And I just remember, as much of a voice as I have now, and as much as people tell me all the time that I love to hear myself talk, I love to hear myself, just speak. I talk too much. That was my biggest issue with myself growing up, was my voice. When I grew up in the 80s and 90s and things like that, that was not celebrated. There was no media outlets giving you positive images of Black.
Mm-hmm.
Every Black male from the time I was born always used to say to me, "You need to put some more bass in your voice." Because before my voice changed, I was a soprano in the choir. Loved being a soprano. Even after my voice changed, they always told me, "You need to put some more bass in your voice." And I remember being a little boy crying. I would sometimes hit myself in the throat to try to make, or I would go and I would scream in my pillow for hours to try to get myself and become hoarse, so that just to try to do something. And it would literally hurt. I remember one time I was spitting. I had to spit, and there was blood in my spit because I was screaming so much in the pillows, because I was trying to force myself to be hoarse, because I was trying to make my voice. And it was the biggest. And I remember I used to spend a lot of time crying about it. Even thinking about it right now is making me almost have a moment. But as y'all know, I'm not emotional at all. But it was a big thing. I never wanted to hear my voice. So if a teacher called me in class, I never wanted to speak. I never wanted to be heard. I never wanted to read out loud because I didn't want to have to speak, because I was taught that my voice was feminine, and I was taught that the way you sound is not how you're supposed to sound, or that's not good, or you're not good enough, or you're not whatever enough. And it was a big thing. And so I just went into that long story. Sorry, let me come back.
No, you're fine.
But to go back into this, sometimes when you try to force it, doing the opposite of not being tolerant, but try to force it on, it can be just as detrimental or dangerous. And it definitely is. And it's so funny in 2020 to talk about, oh, you don't like your voice. You know how many, because students today don't have to deal with that like they did 30 years ago, where that was a big thing, where you needed to have the masculine husky voice, and you need, nowadays these girls be trying to sound more they try to sound more feminine than they probably need to. I don't know. It's so funny. It's so weird how things change.
It is, and again, as an educator, you will be surprised that those are the small. Like, here's the thing: whatever I have done, and I've talked to El Teddy about this this school year. Whatever I've done, I must have created a very safe space. I've had a lot of students who are probably the Q. They're questioning. Come to me to have conversations with me. I was asked to be the school sponsor for the Gay Alliance for our county, that kind of thing. So whatever I've done, I must have created a safe space. But again, I don't feel like I've done any major things. I think that I've not treated it like it was a disease, or we had to whisper, oh, well, he was gay. You know what I mean? Like, I spoke about it like it was a proud part of who this person was and what they stood for and how they lived their life. You know what I'm saying? And so even again, you don't know who in your classroom may be questioning or may be gay. I was looking at We're Here, great show on HBO, and Shangela was telling his story. You know who Shangela is. She's I know but I'm saying for the people listening, Shangela is a drag queen who was on RuPaul and has gone on to do some great things. And Shangela said, I knew I was gay. Like, I knew I was gay, but I also knew that nothing good happened to queer people in my town. And so I kept it to myself. Like you said, I tried to keep that bass in my voice. I grew a mustache and a beard, and I did all the things that I thought I needed to do to sort of mask that until I could get to a place where I thought I could be myself. And so I say that to say, you don't know who in your classroom already knows or is questioning or thinks. And so the smallest things, like not allowing students to say things like, oh man, you gay. Oh, you acting gay. Oh, you like girls, huh? Like, those little comments, when you address them and you let everybody know that this is not a space where that's going to be tolerated. And a lot of times kids they're like, well, what did I say? Because it's just so much everyday part of their conversation that they're allowed to say everywhere else, not understanding how that statement can affect somebody. And so it's the small things that we can do. And we can even do it at home with our students. I keep saying students, with our children. We can even do it at home and not allowing those types of comments to go. And sometimes it's the adults. I mean, I have some people in my family who make some very insensitive comments, and I check them. Now, I may not be able to change them, but I let them know that I'm not cool with that language around me. Like, that's not cool for me, to me. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of it goes back to that. El Teddy, you said you had were you able to put your hands on those resources that you had from when you were in the classroom, or is that something you'll post later?
I'll post it because I got to go to that jump drive.
I know you got to go through a bunch of stuff, honey. You have so many resources, hunty. And I know you don't use this stuff right now every day, so it's a matter of finding where it is. Mm-hmm. Also, in the chat, I did, I can't post the video on our page because it is El Teddy's content and we'll get dinged for it, but I did post the link in the
What
chat.
did you get dinged if I dinged you?
Huh?
Wouldn't you only get dinged if I dinged you?
No, YouTube will do it. They'll say that it's duplicate. YouTube will do it. Not so much now, but if we get to the point where we're trying to monetize the channel, it could be get dinged. But I do have it up. I posted El Teddy's Alphabet People, the link to his Alphabet People video. It is in the chat, and again, I will add it to the list of resources because that was actually a great video. And I know I've spoken on this before, but I've used the gingerbread man in my classroom when I was doing my AP psychology class, and we were talking about sexuality, and it absolutely was a great tool. It was a great resource for my students. It helped explain and break it down, to again getting into the tolerance part of it, so that people understand the difference between, I think people don't, a lot of people don't understand the difference between sexuality and biology, and understanding those differences. There's actually, well, that's a sidebar. I don't want to get off on that, but remind me to tell you later on. There's a great debate right now going on with some comments that J.K. Rowling made in reference to transgender women. Mm-hmm. So, and it's become a great debate in reference to that. So, I know for myself, that's something that I'm going to be looking into, including with my lesson plans, because now it is sanctioned throughout the county, and there's actually a chapter we'll be teaching. I'm sure, to be honest with you, I'm pretty certain they're going to probably start with Stonewall, and that's going to be where they're going to start with the history of the gay rights movement.
But and let me say this. Like I said, I am going to produce. There is a video coming on my channel. There'll be actually a couple videos, at least. I know there'll be at least 2 videos this month, and I'll try to do a 3rd video this month, highlighting Black people on the spectrum, only because it's just like when you teach U.S. history. They want to teach U.S. history, but they don't teach Black history.
Nope, not at all.
And if you think they don't teach Black history, there's nothing. You can't even really find anything on Black LGBT history.
Yeah. And even when you teach about certain people, that's not included.
Exactly.
Like, again, we were talking about Langston Hughes, and I was telling you, I said, well, a lot of my students, when we do speak on the Harlem Renaissance, they've heard of Langston Hughes, had no idea that Langston Hughes was bisexual. So it's like, you definitely, you teach the people, but you have to include the totality of their story. And I think when we don't include it, it's almost that silent, like going back to what I said about that silent, well, they were gay, like making
right. Or the fact that even like, for example, dare I say Malcolm X and his bisexuality, people don't even touch it, don't even address it. But that's a whole different.
I was gonna say, you just hit me with something I've never heard that before. So
wow, we'll talk about it. Yeah, we'll talk about that offline. Yes.
No, I've never ever in my life ever
heard about Malcolm X.
And I wanted to be Malcolm X. I've studied everything I thought I did. I've never heard that before.
Wow, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot about it. And then we'll talk to y'all about it too.
Yeah, because I've never heard that one before. Anyway. So as far as teaching tolerance in the classroom, I think we sort of covered most of what we wanted to cover. We'll definitely give you guys a list of resources. As with all of our topics, this is something that I'm sure we will continue to speak on again as we go through.
The link to the gingerbread man also in our resources.
I can. The link to the gingerbread.
I know, because we're talking about,
Matter of fact, let me write this down so I'll make sure I don't miss a resource, honey, because it's a whole lot. I know the link, the email that I sent you, I'm gonna drop all of those links. And then your so gingerbread man or person.
I never remember the website.
I can just Google it. The gingerbread person, because it's not called man, it's gingerbread person.
I'm called the gingerbread person. Excuse me.
Gingerbread person. Gingerbread, your people video, which I dropped that, and it was another link that the video, and it was another link that we said we would include. What was it? I don't remember now.
About our girl, Did we say we was gonna include the video? But no, we didn't.
Okay. Now, what I want to say, so we have, I'll make sure I remember it, but I think those were the resources. I want to say this to you guys. I want to thank, you know, I want to thank you guys, those who come through regularly. People are talking. Our numbers may not necessarily, our subscriber numbers may not necessarily be reflective of the conversation, but I will say, yeah, yes, the gingerbread person is the more appropriate pronoun, Miss Quintessential. That's something, I think that's fairly recent. I want to say either El Teddy corrected me or my students. I think my students might have corrected me, to be honest with you, when we were speaking on it, and they were doing their own. Because again, I lit the spark, and my students went off and did their own research. And my AP kids, I should say, and I think they were the ones that actually corrected me and told me it's person. I think they actually were the ones. I had a couple of students in my AP class who were on the spectrum, and so I think one of them probably corrected me. But I want to say to you guys, those of you who are regulars, somebody's talking about something, because I have been in 2 separate chats where people have referenced this channel, the Teacher Project 2.0. This morning I had an experience where someone gave some information about autism that wasn't correct. And, you know, me being the educator that I am, I had to correct it. And someone else said, hey, you guys need to check out Really Be at El Teddy's channel, the Teacher Project, because they speak on this, and they actually did a whole video on autism. And so that was the second time that that's happened to me. So I just want to thank you guys. Y'all are talking now. Like I said, the subscribership is moving slow, but I'm not even focused on that so much as people are getting the information. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was the vision when I spoke to El Teddy and we agreed to do this. The vision was for us to get the information out and to try to be a resource for parents, focusing on the African American community and the LGBTQIA community. So I just want to thank you guys. Somebody's talking about something. Oh, thank you so much. And Quintessential, thank you. She said she shared us on LinkedIn, and she's getting ready to share us on Design for Humanity.
Thank you so much, Quintessential, because I know you do a lot to share, videos and stuff like that, and not just Quintessential, but everybody who shares videos and things like that. And I say all of the time, if you want to, if you know other educators that would like to come on and speak on live with us about certain topics or address something, we are open to that. Or even if you as a parent, or not even a parent, just a person who wants to talk more or learn more about education, and you say, can I come on and speak about this, or actually, we are more than willing to do that. Sometimes I wish Discovering Des would come over and talk and chat with us. Inside too.
Definitely, the door is open.
You don't watch the replay, so I'm talking to you, Discovering Des.
Absolutely, yes. We're talking to you, Discovering Des. The door is open. I mean, we always come through on StreamYard. And so if there's any point in time where you have information to share, or you want to come on and speak with us, please, please, please say, hey, can you drop the link? Because I'm always open. Like, I'm always learning. I learned, what did I tell you, El Teddy, that happened earlier this week? I think I told you about it. Something happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, I learned something new. What was it? Tag on it now. I can't remember. I guess I didn't learn it.
I remember you telling me, but I don't remember what it was. I remember.
Right. I guess I didn't learn it too well because I forgot it now. But I was in a conversation, and somebody was sharing some information with me in reference to. I'm gonna remember it as soon as we get off of here. But anyway, I say all that to say I'm always open. I want to learn. I don't know everything. I want to, but I don't. Please, you guys, check out, if you are not subscribed to El Teddy, please make sure you subscribe to El Teddy, because he will be dropping some great videos over the next week or so in reference to Pride and the spectrum, and let's get to know some of these people that we may or may not know on the spectrum and their contributions, not just to the LGBTQIA community, but to our history, period. I think he's going to actually do a tag. I gave him an idea. I hope he does it. A tag that maybe we can all take part in as well. So any other announcements, Dr. El Teddy?
No, just look for continued great content that we'll be putting out. Yes.
Absolutely.
Um, I do want to. I am going to pull some resources together. So at least one of these videos that we do during this month, that it will be focused on um,
Mhm.
pride in education and stuff. The spectrum of education and stuff like that. Also, I do want us, and we'll talk about this off stage. But I know Black June is also Black Music Month,
Yes,
and
it is.
that is music is a huge part of education. Um,
Absolutely.
not just R&B, jazz, and rap, but we're talking the classical. We're talking the band world. Dare I say band? All of that stuff. So I definitely think that we should not let June go by without covering Black Music Month as well.
Facts. Absolutely. That's you know what that's I know June is Black Music Month, but I swear I think with everything going on, it was like pew. But
And
that's
normally we
absolutely
have
correct.
the BET Awards this month, but I
Yeah, they're
guess
going to do them virtually, so they're going to still have the awards. They're going to do them virtually, which will be interesting. It's been really interesting to see the adjustments that people have been able to make with our new normal. Um, But with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead. We're gonna close it out. We are back on our regular schedule, you guys. School for me is over, and so well, give or take, it is over, and so I'll be back on our regular schedule. But yeah, the next we'll definitely be speaking more on those resources, and we'll also be talking about music and how it connects to education and resources and how you can positively infuse music into your lessons and things of that nature. With that being said, as always, I'm going to shut up and give El Teddy the final word.
Yeah, you always say that. Always. Definitely. As always be always be a lifelong learner. You want to be a lifelong learner. We're both lifelong learners. We want you to be lifelong learners, and definitely know that education is one of the most powerful tools that you will have in your arsenal. So just always stay educated. Thank you all for being vocal and active and present. Um, and that's all we got for you all. Until next time, press the